Brandon Marcello, 247 Sports, joins us. Craig Smoak, Paul Catalina, David Smoak, 365 Sports. Brandon, thanks for your time. So I've seen a couple of different notes, not a lot, but I've seen where it does appear as if the SEC might not make any decisions or make a decision not to make a decision on the scheduling. What is your thoughts covering the conference of what you think they will do or what they should do? Thanks for your time, too.
Yeah, no problem. What the hell are they waiting on? That's my question. I mean, they've been discussing this for over a year, and here we are on the eve of them potentially holding a vote among the athletic directors, and they're going, we don't have enough information. I don't – the idea that they don't have enough information on what the 12-team college football playoff and what they're going to how they're going to weigh strength of schedule and all that, they've had a year to discuss this, and if they don't have enough information after that year – then that means that they're waiting for the college football playoff to actually expand and to be played, because at that point, that's when you get the actual tangible evidence. There's only so much you could provide beforehand. So what are you really waiting on? It sounds to me like they're waiting on the playoff to actually be played with 12 teams, but that's the excuse right now. I think really the root of all this, and they won't say it's the money. ESPN is yet to commit to how much money they're going to pay for this extra inventory because of the financial marketplace right now. Media companies are struggling. Streamers are hemorrhaging money, and they're not ready to really commit to how much more they're willing to pay for that extra inventory. And so I think they're going to kick the can down the road based off the conversations that I've had right now. This is the most likely reason, and they're going to kick the can down the road. And for a year or two, they're going to stick with an 8-game model with the one permanent opponent and 7 rotating with no divisions. And then a year from now, or maybe 2 years from now, they'll sit back down and decide whether to actually go to a 9-game model. But that's where they're at right now. And it's kind of silly to me that this is the main talking point at their spring meetings. And then they're actually acting like that, we might have a vote, we might not, when in fact, it just sounds like they never really were going to actually vote on this.
Greg Sankey seemed like he really wanted it to happen and that he was leaning towards the 9-game format because everybody else is going to do 9, really, and that's more inventory to sell later on in the next deal. I would seem to think that the positives on this outweigh the negatives for the SEC, who controls their own narrative anyway all the time better than anybody, maybe even in sports.
Yeah, it just, again, a lot of this just doesn't make sense. The arguments against the 9-game model for the SEC, they're going to go to 9 games because there's more money to it, and the SEC wants to have better competition. And the better way to get better competition is for them to actually play against each other. And Greg Sankey has said that it's proven, even in baseball, they look at the baseball model for them in the SEC, that by playing more games against each other, it raises the strength of schedule among all those teams. They get more teams into the NCAA tournament come baseball time, and they perform better in the NCAA tournament and going to the College World Series. And that's the same thing that's probably going to happen with college football with the SEC going to a 9-game schedule. Them adding 1 game is not going to suddenly just cripple the SEC and where they're just walking around on one leg. I just don't understand where some people sit there and think, well, we're going to play 1 more game, and you know what? That means we're not going to get 3 teams in the 12-team playoff. It only means we're going to get 2. No, in fact, you're probably going to increase your chances. Because in my world, where I think is reality, I look at it like this. The Pac-12, say they stick with a 9-game schedule in the Pac-12. The SEC, let's say they stick with this 8-game model with a 12-team playoff starting up. No way in heck would a 9-3 SEC team with an 8-game model like that get into the 12-team playoff. The Pac-12 would have a stronger case for that. Now, what if there is an SEC team that is 9-3, and there is a Pac-12 team that is 10-2, but that 10-2 team we know is weaker than that 9-3 SEC team. We see it with our own eyes. We believe it. Everybody's saying it. But the College Football Playoff Committee or whatever sits there and goes, well, Pac-12 plays 9 games in their conference. The SEC only plays 8. Who wins out in that situation? if you flip it and there was 9-game model in the SEC, that SEC team at 9-3, I guarantee you would get in over that 10-2 Pac-12 team. So again, I don't know. Maybe am I taking crazy pills? Am I the crazy one here? I don't know. That's how I see it, guys.
I think we've been saying that for quite some time. Brandon Marcello, 247 Sports with us. Craig?
No, yeah, Bernie, you're absolutely right. I mean, it makes no sense outside of the money part that you mentioned, and that's the only thing that really makes this seem like a thing that, needs to still iron out some details if you're worried about the money part. But all the rest of it, I mean, you laid it out. It doesn't make any sense for them to not go to 9. You mentioned, though, like that was a big talking point, but there's obviously other things being talked about. I saw, Saban, he's talking about unionizing, and there's obviously going to be NIL discussion and all these other things. What were maybe some other things that did stand out to you over the course of just hearing some of what was being talked about around Destin?
They're talking a lot about field storming and court storming and how there's been issues with that in the SEC here in recent years. You guys remember the Tennessee-Alabama game this past season. Some safety concerns for Alabama players trying to get off the field. And that's been an issue in the SEC for the better part of this last decade. And they've been levying these financial penalties against teams upwards up to $500,000. But again, that's not going to stop the fans. They're going to be sitting in the stands going, oh, you're going to fine the school? Well, that's no money on my pocket. I don't care. So why not do it? And in fact, you have ADs at these SEC programs going, I'm framing the check that we fill out to the SEC. In fact, I had an AD at Auburn tell me that way back in 2013 when they beat Alabama in the Kick 6 game in the Iron Bowl. So, some of the ideas have been heavier financial penalties, which maybe that would work. Hey, and even this has been thrown about, losing a home game in the future. Could you imagine that? Them ripping an SEC home game away? That would be drastic. And I doubt they put that on the docket and they approved that. But again, I think it shows you just how serious they are in trying to protect the players, or for that matter, protect the fans. And I'm very curious to see where they land on this, because I'm not sure they'll approve any measures here this week. But what exactly are they going to do with all that? There could be some interesting penalty structures here for storming the fields here in the future.
Brandon, the Big 12 has played everybody within the conference. This year it changes because there's 14 teams with Texas OU for another year. But they've played 9 conference games, I think, since 2012 or whatever the year with A&M and Missouri. And I saw yesterday in one of the articles I read about the scheduling, I don't know if you saw this, I'm sure you have, but that means someone might have to play 5 road games in the conference. Right. It's every other year they would do that. Is that really a sticking point?
Not really. I haven't really heard that being an issue for a lot of teams. Now, I was actually just talking to Chris Del Conte, the Texas AD, just a few minutes ago as you guys called, and they're talking a lot about how they want those home games, and of course, they're going to continue playing OU in the Cotton Bowl, but they want to be able to play those home games. And I think it was going to be interesting to kind of divert a little bit to this. I asked Chris, I go, so is that first game you play against Texas A&M, is it going to be in College Station like everybody assumes and Ross Bjork believes? And he's like, well, I haven't heard that. He's waiting to get his voice heard too to see what happens with that. But no, having that uneven schedule, not an issue, because you're gonna get the flip side of it in the very next year. But it's an issue, and it has been an issue obviously for OU and Texas, and for that matter in the SEC when you look at Florida and Georgia, because they also play in a neutral site. And I'm fascinated to see why these teams continue to play neutral sites. I don't know why Florida and Georgia still do it. I understand why OU and Texas do it, because it really is a tremendous tradition and a unique atmosphere. Florida, Georgia is a great game, but the atmosphere is not something that has to be protected. That should be a home-and-home series.
Brandon Marcello, 247 Sports. What has it been like with both Texas and Oklahoma, as they should be, with representation? You mentioned Del Conte. We saw the flags outside of the headquarters in Destin, or in the hotel in Destin. Has it just been business as normal?
Yeah, pretty much. They can't vote on anything here, but Chris says that I'm sitting in the room, and whenever they ask for hand raising or whatever, I make sure to keep my hand down because I'm not allowed to really voice that, but they get their opinions asked their opinions, and they offer it. For example, this 9-game schedule thing, Texas and OU have voiced to them, we want 9 games in a conference schedule, so they know where they stand on that. The issue is they can't vote. If they were to conduct a vote tomorrow and the ADs have their final meeting, which they're fine with, but it's got to be a little weird. It's also got to be a little weird that, obviously you got to leave the room on some things in the Big 12, and you come to the SEC, and not to say you're comparing notes, but it's got to be a very strange time. And I'll say this, Chris Del Conte seems to be very, very comfortable. He's the only AD I have seen here leave a meeting wearing shorts.
Look, it's destined, baby.
He's going to get an extra $25 million a year. He can afford them, and no matter what the brand.
And it's Texas. They're not afraid of anybody.
No, they're not.
Already comfortable.
Yeah, Brandon, great stuff, man. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, listen, I think Texas and OU are very, very happy with where they're at right now. In fact, Chris got asked about throwing their weight around, like was always been the rumors, when I say rumors, but the talk in the Big 12. He's like, yeah, I've never really heard that. Like, I don't see where that's coming from. I can't speak for before me or whatever. And he says he loves the energy in the room in the SEC. And I'll say this, if Texas or you try to throw their weight around the SEC, they're going to get rebuffed and I think pushed down back in their seats, because the SEC, as much as people want to criticize it or whatever, they do a pretty good job of keeping the voices on equal footing.
It's amazing because that conference knows they're as strong as the weakest link. I've said this many times. They take care of Vanderbilt or Mississippi State as much as they take care of Alabama, Florida, Georgia, or anyone else. Brandon, thank you so much for your time. Great stuff. We appreciate the report from Destin.
All right, gentlemen. Appreciate you.
Brandon Marcello, good stuff, 247 Sports with us. We'll have Barry Trammell, the Oklahoman. He's going to